Thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. It was another big deadline week for lawmakers at the state capitol. Thursday was the final day of floor action on bills coming from their original chamber. The issue of guns and where people can carry them with a permit stirred some House members. Democratic Representative Charles Young of Meridian wanted to make a point about the hypocrisy of gun laws by waving a gun over his head at the podium on the House floor on Thursday. He says he was questioning a state capitol rule that says only law enforcement officers can carry a firearm in that building unless a majority of lawmakers grant permission for someone else to do so. Representative Young's display came one day after the House passed a bill that would give those with a concealed carry permit permission to carry in public places, including college campuses and county courthouses. House Bill 1083 passed by a vote of 80 to 29. The bill's supporters say it's about preserving the right to bear arms and to self-defense. Opponents say it's a serious public safety issue. Here's some of the debate from the House floor.
This recognizes people who care enough to take the class, to pay their fee, to spend an entire day of their life and renew it and do the right thing and get trained. They should have the right to carry to protect themselves and their families. Our Constitution recognizes this. Article 3, Section 12. Thank you, gentlemen from Lowndes, for reminding me. And it says only the legislature can regulate concealed carry. It passed overwhelmingly. Republicans voted for it. Democrats voted for it. It's been the law for 7 years. Yes, there are background checks required. You can't even get a general license without a background check. And if you do anything or get convicted or have a mental deficiency, it comes back and it's reported through the NICS system and your license is revoked. That's a bunch of inaccurate information. These are the safest people in our state when it comes to concealed carry. These are folks who are concerned about the safety and well-being of themselves and their families, the enhanced concealed carry holders. And I submit to you, if it's been the law for 7 years and all of you voted for it in 2011, why not vote for it today?
This is about the most dilatory thing that could be brought out here. It is totally unnecessary. Now, I went absolutely ballistic when we allowed guns in a courthouse because my mama's a judge in Lee County. And that's foolish. Now, mind you, she's sitting on the bench as we speak with a .38 strapped to her. Yes, that the Lee County Sheriff's Department trained her to use because she's the judge. But there are places where guns shouldn't be. I know that's not the bill. I understand he's expanding this to say state parks. Hadn't even called it. You don't even have to have a mental competency test to get these permits, okay? And now nobody can say no. That don't make any sense. I can tell you what this bill's about, and you're going to do what you got to do. It's about this right here, NRA, A or F, whichever rating you want to have. But I'm taking my chances personally. You know, this is a ridiculous piece of legislation, and as far as I'm concerned, the chairman ought to be ashamed for bringing it out here.
All right, question now recurs on House Bill 1083. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 80 yeas, 29 nays, the bill passes.
Glenn Boyce is the Commissioner of Higher Education at the Mississippi Institutions of Higher Learning. He released this statement. He says, quote, "The safety of students, faculty, staff, and visitors on our university campuses is a top priority for the Board of Trustees and university leaders. House Bill 1083 compromises our ability to protect and ensure the safety of those on our campuses because it nullifies and prohibits any policies and/or authority to designate sensitive areas of campus where weapons should not be allowed," end quote. State university presidents, as well as the president of the SEC, have raised their voices in opposition to the bill. It now goes to the Senate for consideration. A bill that would have given more families state money to send their children to private school is dead. Senate Bill 2623 was not brought to the floor for a vote before the Thursday deadline. It was intended for families with special needs children and low to middle income families in poor performing school districts. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves says there was not enough support for the proposal in the House. He released this statement. He says, quote, "We need to continue to educate legislators in both chambers and in both political parties on the success Mississippi parents have seen in the current ESA program and how school choice will have long-term benefits to our state." End quote. The issue of abortion is back in the spotlight. The House passed a bill that would make Mississippi the first state in the nation to ban most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Current law bans the procedure after 20 weeks. MPB's Desiree Frazier spoke with Republican Representative Tracy Arnold of Prentiss and Democratic Representative Kathy Sykes of Jackson about the bill.
I am a co-author of that piece of legislation, and I support it because I see it as an opportunity to preserve and save the lives of the innocent unborn.
What do you say to people who are concerned about restricting a woman's right to an abortion? Right now it's at 20 weeks. Why does 5 weeks make a difference?
Well, you know, the children that are aborted in that 5-week spectrum could actually be a lot of children, so that's several lives you're talking about. You know, I think we need to get back to the point that, you know, contraceptives and birth control pills and that kind of thing is what we need to utilize, you know, for people that don't want to have children till later in their lives instead of abortion. You know, that, to me, that should never really be an option to abort a child, because a child has a life, and life is a gift from God.
Well, I am against any bill that further erodes a woman's right to make decisions about their bodies. You know, as we celebrate the 45th year of Roe v. Wade, you know, we should, by this point, be adjusted to the fact that it is the law of the land, and we should stop trying to put restrictions on a woman's right to choose and to make decisions, healthcare decisions for her and her family.
The 15-week abortion bill, House Bill 1510, would make an exception if the fetus has a severe abnormality or the life of the mother is in danger. The bill now goes to the Senate. A bill that would put the newly created Department of Child Protection Services back under the State Department of Health and Human Services passed the Senate on Tuesday. Senate Bill 2675 would allow for CPS to remain a sub-agency while also enabling it to take advantage of federal dollars, which it was unable to do on its own. Child Protection Services is currently facing a $12 million deficit. Here is some of the debate on that from the Senate floor.
So this bill is going to correct the colossal mistake that we made last year by separating DHS and the Child Protective Services.
It's going to go a long way to fixing that. I've been meeting with DHS people this morning, and we were mainly talking about the deficit that has come about and their work on that, and they all believe that this will take care of that.
Okay, will the monies that have been lost as a result of this agency separating, will we recoup those monies?
Yes, we're working on that right now, as a matter of fact. And also the loss of money or the deficit, whereas when we first looked at it, it seemed to be a total revenue problem, but there's some spending sides on there also that we're just now getting into, seeing where some costs were increased over and above what we thought they were. So all of that is part of the deficit that we're dealing with, but that's, when they initially came to us, it was 52 million, and then there was some work done in working with DHS, they got it down to 38. Actually, when I talked to Judge Dickinson, it was 38, and now it's down to 12. So a lot of people have come to the table that were a part of this and said, how could they help? I'm talking about providers and things like that.
And I don't know how we got in this situation. I sure thought we were on the way 2 years ago to complying with the court order, cooperating with the governor, and getting us down the road to where we needed to be. And frankly, I'm not sure we're any better off 2 years later than we were where we started. And again, to a large extent, as so many things are, this is an executive branch issue. I mean, we don't go run agencies. We don't have the capacity to do that. So I'm here to say that I regret that 2 years ago, we didn't do a better job of vetting all this, and I didn't do a better job of vetting all this when we started, but here we are. Thank you.
The bill now goes to the House. The Senate also passed what's known as the Medicaid Tech Bill on Tuesday. Senate Bill 2836 keeps the Medicaid program functioning for the 750,000 Mississippians who rely on it. The bill calls for creating study committees to look at the efficiency of the managed care program and Medicaid reimbursements. Lowering reimbursements to medical providers, which was in an original version of the bill, was taken out. The bill's author, Republican Senator Bryce Wiggins of Jackson, says the bill adds transparency and accountability to the Medicaid program. He explained during questions on the bill on the Senate floor.
Is it my understanding that your bill contains a 5% cost reduction for certain providers?
No, that's incorrect. So what happened is that this legislature, before many of us were even here, the legislature put in what's called a 5% cost containment across the board. When I originally filed the bill, there were exemptions over time that were put in. And so it simply removed those exemptions. And understand that overall, this bill, I've said it in the paper, I've said it everywhere, it's about improving health outcomes and controlling the always escalating costs. So that was part of it. That being said, the committee with the committee sub put all of that back in, it's like it is current law, and asked for the Medical Care Advisory Committee to look at that, like they've been looking at everything for the last year and a half.
Democrats say the state should expand Medicaid, which Republicans oppose. Federal and state tax dollars go to fund the government health insurance program. The bill goes to the House side for consideration. It appears the House and the Senate are on a collision course over how to spend hundreds of millions of dollars from the 2010 BP oil spill settlement. The House passed 2 bills on Wednesday that would set up 10 accounts based on geographical regions and population to spread the money for projects across the state. There would also be an account reserved for the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund. The Mississippi Development Authority would administer the money. Republican Representative Charles Busby of Pascagoula explained the plan for House lawmakers.
So, gentlemen, if it's going to be $40 million a year and the counties are going to get 50% of that, so be $20 million, right?
No, sir. No, sir. There is no division of the funds in here, gentlemen. There's only the mechanism for dividing the funds. That decision has not been made yet. Whatever monies are not deposited in the Gulf Coast Restoration Fund will be distributed to the rest of the state in the manner prescribed. And that's half of those dollars, whatever those dollars may be divided evenly by the counties and half proportional to the population.
Okay, I was just thinking you said we was going to get $40 million a year and 50% of that.
That's what I meant.
Okay, so that'd be $20 million. It's pretty much, by the time you divide it by all the counties, you really ain't getting nothing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that it wouldn't be worth a big fight here, yes, sir.
And then by the time MDA plays politics, you really for sure ain't going to get nothing.
Well,
it goes by the populations.
We limit their administrative fee in here to 1%.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? John from Adams has further questions.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand this. The division is not counties, it's 10 PDD districts. So the counties within that district, there could be counties within that district that don't get anything. It's just in that district.
Yes, sir. Up to the Legislative Advisory Committee working in conjunction with MDA to figure out which projects.
So, I mean, essentially, if Adams, Franklin, and Jefferson County are in the same PDD, Adams could make all the application. The others could not make any application. All the money could go to Adams County.
Yes, sir, that's right.
So I don't want people to think that the county's sitting back and you're going to get some money. You got to, if you're in that district, you got to fight other counties in that district to get that money.
That. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Question occurs on House Bill 1512. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine. Madam Clerk, by vote 110 yeas, 7 nays, the bill passes.
The Senate has its own BP settlement bill. It calls for all money received to go to projects on the Gulf Coast. Mississippi will receive $40 million a year for the next 15 years, in addition to the $150 million the state has already received. Now, let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Lucian Smith is the chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party, and he is sitting in for Austin Barber this week. And we welcome both of you. Lucian, you have a new title since we last saw you. We appreciate you making time for us.
Absolutely.
on
Always
that
a pleasure
issue.
to be with y'all.
Let's start with what we started with on At Issue tonight. And Representative Charles Young with the gun talking about the rules at the Capitol related to gun measures. This was an unconventional approach, Brandon, to making a point.
It was. I think we're all familiar with that NFL segment that they do on ESPN, "Come on, man," whenever a player makes a mistake. I think Representative Young was trying to make a point, and I think there was an important point there, and it was one that we should think about, which is, let's give some pause to where we're expanding this idea that, the Second Amendment protection should always extend to wherever we can think of. But it's a bad look to be brandishing a firearm over your head at the well of the Capitol. And so I think that it probably a little bit of his message got lost in translation there. Other than that, I appreciate those members that kind of said, let's just be careful and mindful as we expand this. And then we heard from the universities and we heard from some athletic conferences who raised their own issues. And, there's some serious dollars that are connected to their concerns. And just perhaps from a fiscal standpoint, we might want to look a little bit more closely at this, if for no other reason than we want Alabama to come play football in Mississippi.
Sometimes more than others.
Right.
But I think I tend to agree. I mean, it's tough to imagine any scenario where a member of the legislature pulling out a pistol is something that you want to have happen. So I agree with you. I would certainly rather that the representative had made that point in a different way. I think a lot of Charles, but I probably wouldn't have suggested that he do that. He makes a valid point that you've got to consider whether the rules that the legislature makes for everybody apply in equal measure to the legislature. But I suspect what you're going to find is that the joint rule he referenced has been on the books for decades, and every 4 years when they reenact the rules, it gets carried forward. And I suspect that the next time they enact rules, it'll probably be lined up with what state law is for everybody else.
Yeah. Let's move on to school choice, and the Lieutenant Governor's comments about support for it didn't seem to be there. A lot of leading Republicans were behind this bill.
Yeah, and it's a shame that it didn't pass out of the Senate. I understand if the Senate didn't feel like it was going to make it all the way through the process, choosing not to bring the bill up. But a lot of times, big ideas like that take multiple sessions before they actually become law. And that is a big idea. It's a huge change to education. I think it's a huge positive change that'll positively impact the lives of students in the state. But I think it's going to take, potentially multiple sessions before we really have the kind of school choice that's involved there. But there are other bills that are pending this year, and so I think we'll continue to have discussions about how we improve education in Mississippi. And I'm confident the Republicans are going to find a way to keep on doing it.
I'm sure we had viewers that were reading carefully and listened as Wilson read the Lieutenant Governor's statement that he didn't bring it out of his own Senate committee for fear that there wasn't sufficient support for it in the House. And that gets my second, come on, man. You don't make a decision based on looking in your crystal ball and what the House might do. What that tells me is that this was a gimmick to begin with. Without even getting to what the bill is, if you go through all the rigmarole and the hearings and then it passes your Senate committee, and then you go through the press conferences last week, and then we had all those children running around with scarves on the week before that, and then it's time to bring it out and you say, well, we're not going to do that for fear of what might happen in the other chamber. That tells me this was a little bit of theater. I hope whoever was lined up to get the nice contribution from the charter school folks and from the voucher people got it, but this really wasn't a real issue this year.
And I don't think to the extent that there was any theater to it, I think it's about educating voters and members so they can get comfortable with it. Because the fact of the matter is, wealthy folks have school choice. They can choose to move to a more expensive district. They can stroke a check to send their kids to a private school. That's not true for middle income and lower income Mississippians, and that's what these bills are really about, is making sure that every Mississippian, regardless of where they live or how much money they make, have access to a high quality education.
Let's move on to the BP settlement money. You've got two different approaches on either side of the Capitol as to what should be done with this money. Assumingly, we'll meet in the middle somewhere along the way.
There's no question that the Gulf Coast bore the brunt of this catastrophe, and it's still, dealing with the fallout from it. And there are scientists and even our own state scientists who will tell you we don't quite have our arms around the impact. So I understand the impulse to dedicate dollars there and to be, attentive to those situations. But our state budget is such that it's very hard for me, even as a son of the Gulf Coast and someone that cares deeply about it, coming out good from this event. It's very hard for me to look at totally earmarking all the dollars to the Gulf Coast, giving all the challenges that we're facing across the state of Mississippi. So I tend to agree with the House bill and what Representative Busby was suggesting, that we do something that's a little bit more measured, perhaps a lion's share to the Gulf Coast, but then we hold back some of this for perhaps other projects. That makes some sense to me given our financial position.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody agrees that the overwhelming majority of the money needs to go to the Gulf Coast. I think there's a question of whether any of it should go to any other part of the state. What's going to be interesting in this process, if you're a casual observer of politics in Mississippi, you think about things in terms of Republican and Democrat. Well, party fights are nothing compared to fights between different regions and fights between the two chambers. And you got both of these going on here. You're going to have the Gulf Coast folks who believe very reasonably that 100% of the money ought to go there. The folks from North Mississippi thinking they ought to get some of it, and the two chambers wanting to fight each other to show who was right. So that's going to be a long, very interesting fight, regardless of your politics.
And I hope that we kind of grow up a little bit from that fight, because one of the things that was interesting about the litigation that followed the oil spill is that we kind of learned that when we talk about the Gulf Coast, it's not just those places where you can see the beach. The entire state of Mississippi is connected to Gulf Coast economy. The Gulf Coast economy is connected to what happens in North Mississippi. Mississippi is a state located on the Gulf of Mexico. Really, the entire state of Mississippi is a coastal state, even if there are some friends in North Mississippi that can't swim. And so I think we make too much of that distinction. The truth of the matter is, we are all very much connected to that Gulf Coast economy. And so whenever we make economic decisions, it pays for us to think from the whole and think about the entire state, because we all contribute to the Gulf Coast economy.
Let's talk about politics and elections now. We have the luxury of having you here, Lucian. Going to be a busy man, I would think, with these other elections coming our way. We've got the congressional and Senate election coming up this year, statewide elected offices in 2019, then another Senate election in 2020 when Thad Cochran will be, his seat will be up for re-election. There are a lot of chess pieces potentially in place here. Look into your crystal ball. How do you think this is going to, do you think Republicans are going to hang on to what they've got as we move forward?
Absolutely. We are a very conservative state. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm in Mississippi about supporting President Trump's agenda. And I think people are going to, the Republicans are going to keep the seats that we've got right now. Obviously, Congressman Harper stepping down in the 3rd Congressional District has created a primary. We've got 5 very strong candidates right now. Qualifying doesn't end for another 3 weeks, but we are going to have a strong Republican nominee who I think is going to go on to Washington and continue to support the president's agenda when they get there. It's a good time to be a Republican in Mississippi.
And how does it feel to be a Democrat in Mississippi right now?
I don't get excited when Mississippi Republicans make good decisions, and thankfully I'm excited a fair amount because they don't make a lot of good decisions. But when it's named Lucian chairman of the party, they made a good decision because Lucian's competent, capable. He's a complete gentleman, knows what he's doing. So I was frustrated by that, but congratulations. You're up to the challenge. What we have to do as a party is to create choice. We have to create choice in the mind of the voters. So oftentimes we haven't even been competent enough to put out a true, honest choice to give voters something to think about. And so for the Democratic Party, it still is about putting one foot in front of the other. It still is about saying that Republicans have had control of this thing for a long time, and we need to look very critically at how we think they have done. And I think there are some serious points to be made there. I think Democrats have a lot to talk about and a lot to be enthusiastic about. But as a state party and the political side of this, we have a lot of challenges. On the other hand, Lucian faces his own tension. This is kind of like being handed the Alabama head coaching job. It's like y'all have done a lot of winning. There ain't too many directions you can go from here. And I do think, as we've seen, these things do tend to be cyclical. There was a time whenever the Democrat sitting over here was just kind of rolling around in an embarrassment of riches. What we did with that, I think, is we got a little complacent. We let some of those muscles atrophy about outreach and how you do basic politicking in the modern era. And so we're trying to catch back up. But our challenge is going to be putting choices out there. We think that our message is a good one. We think it's a better one for the state of Mississippi than the Republican one. But our challenge is going to be being competent enough to package that and get it out in a way that really gives voters a real choice.
Where do you think Democrats can make inroads most easily? On the state level for these statewide elected offices next year, or for one of these seats in Washington?
There are serious tensions within the Republican Party. And the truth of the matter is, in Mississippi right now, we are not quite at a point of going strength on strength with the Republican Party to win a highly contested seat. But whenever they cannibalize each other, and whenever the far-right Tea Party folks start going at it with the establishment folks, it creates opportunity and space. We saw that in Alabama. We've seen that in other states. And so for us as Mississippi Democrats, we are going to have to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves. And that's going to be where our real opportunity comes from.
And as chairman of the state party, how do you manage all of that?
Well, I mean, I think part of the job is just making sure we continue to tell our story. And I think most Mississippians, I think the Alabama case was a fairly unique situation that won't be repeated over here, because most Mississippians understand that even if you disagreed with who the candidate came out of the primary being, that candidate is still going to be more representative of your values, your policy belief than any Democrat, even if it wasn't your first choice in the primary. So I think Republicans start in a very, very strong position, and once we tell our story, we're going to keep on winning.
Lucian Smith, thank you for sitting in this week. Brandon, thank you as always. And we thank you for joining us on At Issue. We're out of time. Don't forget you can watch the program online on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And we invite you to join us again next Friday for another edition of At Issue. Good night.